In multiple archives, some public, some never cataloged, some stones were never traded, never cut, and never named in any surviving text. They appear in vaults that collapsed before history began, in chambers built without doors, and in burial sites where no one was meant to speak. These are not heirlooms. They were not lost. They were placed, sometimes embedded above ceilings no one could enter, and sometimes sealed inside a vessel, untouched for 10,000 years, holding a crystal older than the Earth's first continent. They are not valuable by carat weight. Most wouldn't pass a basic gem appraisal, yet their presence repeats across borders, across centuries and ritual spaces with no shared culture. What do you call a gemstone that seems designed not to be understood, or one that records nothing, except the fact that it was chosen? This is not a list of expensive stones, but the one ranked number one, the only known object deliberately buried that predates the formation of Earth's crust, has no price. Not because it's priceless, but because no one dares place a price on it. And this is where we begin. Some of these stones glow, some fractures under heat. Others transmit nothing at all, except silence. But the first one on record? It doesn't shimmer, it doesn't speak, and if there was a message, it was never meant to be read. Rank number 10, Goshenite, a record left unwritten. In the climate-controlled vaults of the Zurich Institute for Cognitive Materials, there is a set of 19 crystals that appear, at first glance, to be quartz. Clear, small, unremarkable, but none are listed under gemstones. They belong to a different archive, one reserved for materials without inscription, without motif, and known ritual function. They are Goshenite, the purest form of beryl, devoid of iron, chromium, or manganese. No color, no flash, and precisely because of that, no symbolic burden. The crystals were excavated in 2007 from Neolithic ash pits in the highlands of Jabal al-Arab, southern Syria. There were no tools, no pottery, no human remains, only basalt hearthstones, and these colorless fragments, always arranged in unpolished triads around a cold center. Carbon dating placed them between 7,200 and 6,900 BCE. Isotope tracing placed their origin thousands of kilometers away, in the pegmatite belts of northeastern Afghanistan. No trade routes connected those two places in that period, and yet, someone moved them, not as cargo, not in bulk, but individually they were placed with a precision that defies randomness. Why? They were too soft to cut, too plain to wear, too chemically neutral to react with offerings or flame. And that is the point. In 2014, a comparative ritual analysis proposed a new framework. These were not memory stones. They were memory barriers, objects not meant to carry a story, but to prevent one from forming. Today, Goshenite holds little value in jewelry markets, $10 to $60 per carat, primarily for use in transparent minimalist designs. But these 19 pieces, they are not cataloged for beauty. They are held and left raw because they resist narrative altogether. We do not display them because we do not know what they were trying to withhold. What do you do with a crystal that resists memory? You document its silence. But what if the stone doesn't stay silent? What if it replaces the words you thought would be there? The Goshenite fragments refused inscription. They were not made to be read, only placed and perhaps to erase. But not every silence was left unmarked. In a different time and under a very different kind of authority, the decision wasn't to remove meaning, it was to replace it with something far more deliberate. Rank number 9, Lapis Lazuli, encoded by absence. In the high-security storage wing of the Middle Eastern archives, behind cases reserved for untranslated materials, 6 fragments of lapis lazuli are stored under restricted access. No carving, no glyphs, no seals, just polished blue stones, each placed where writing should have been. They were discovered in elite tombs across 3 of Mesopotamia's oldest city-states, Tel Brak, Mari, and Ebla, but not in jewelry caches, not in pigment containers. Each one was found inside a carved clay recess, positioned precisely where cuneiform tablets were expected. And yet, there were no tablets, no inscriptions, nothing but lapis. The assumption was looting, but no residue of ink, no wax, no bitumen, no physical trace of text ever having been there. Instead, each lapis fragment was shaped into a parallelogram, its angles aligned to internal cleavage planes. A format suggesting not symbolism, but structure, geometry instead of language. In 2009, a cross-site comparison revealed a deeper regularity. These non-linguistic stones appeared in tombs only when written text was absent, not destroyed, not worn away, deliberately left out. A proposal from symbolic cognition researchers suggests this wasn't an omission, but a refusal. These stones served as a semantic blocker, placed not to carry knowledge, but to withhold it. Where words would have commanded, these stones denied. Lapis lazuli geologically originates in Badakhshan, northeastern Afghanistan. In antiquity, it traveled across empires to be used in seals, swords, and statues. Its deep blue, flecked with pyrite, was a pigment of kings and kingdoms. But these six, they do not decorate, they do not inform. They replace the written word with intentional opacity. On the modern gem market, high-grade lapis sells for $100 to $500 per carat, depending on clarity and calcite content. But in this case, the value isn't optical, it's positional, because someone, somewhere, decided that nothing should be said, and left lapis in the place of language, not as silent, but as a structure that made language impossible. Lapis lazuli was placed where language was expected and denied, a rejection of permanence, a boundary that words were forbidden to cross. But sometimes the boundary was physical, and the stone didn't just mark it, it sealed it. Rank number 8, Carnelian, the boundary that wasn't meant to be crossed. On the remote sandstone plateaus of Tassili Niger, straddling present-day Algeria and Libya, 24 pieces of carnelian were excavated from early human dwellings that had never been inhabited, not worn as beads, not shaped into seals, but rectangular, identical in dimension, and always buried horizontally beneath the thresholds of abandoned doorways. The material itself, carnelian, does not belong to this terrain. Geological analysis traces it to riverbeds over 1,000 kilometers away, in Mauritania, and yet not a single site along the path between shows intermediate deposition. The placement wasn't symbolic, it was spatial, always aligned east to west, perpendicular to movement, and always in structures that were entered once and never again. No ashes, no tools, no signs of daily life. The carnelian units marked entrances that led nowhere. Doorways built, crossed, and then sealed forever. In 2019, a study led by Professor Salima Rashid proposed an unorthodox theory. These were not homes, not tombs, but one-time ceremonial enclosures, marked by carnelian to signify a cognitive or spiritual point of no return. Not a barrier to others, but a boundary the builder never intended to cross again. Today, commercial carnelian is common. Reddish-orange cabochons retail for $5 to $20 per carat, sold in bracelets, amulets, and beads. But these 24 slabs, each measuring exactly 32.7 millimeters, were never meant to be worn. They weren't left behind. They were left in place, as if to say the threshold has been crossed and no one should follow. Some stones defined a line, a place you were not meant to return. But what if the message wasn't a warning, wasn't even a boundary, but a sign left in plain sight, carved carefully, and still never understood? Rank number 7, Chalcedony, the marker that was never interpreted. In the river-cut ritual mounds along the upper Euphrates, southeast of modern-day Turkey, 11 carved tablets were excavated between scorched limestone altars and stone channels thought to carry ceremonial fluids. Each one is made from chalcedony, banded, cryptocrystalline, resistant to weather, and notoriously difficult to shape. But these tablets weren't used for durability. They weren't tools. They weren't offerings. Each bore a single shallow incision, linear, angular, never curved. The marks weren't letters, They didn't match Luwian, Aramaic, or any known regional script. And they weren't ornamental. The grooves cut directly against the stone's natural banding, a move typically avoided in decorative carving. The locations were consistent, always beneath ritual basins, always placed face down, and never repeated more than twice per site. Initial theories proposed libation tokens, but Chalcedony doesn't absorb. It resists fluid, and hyperspectral analysis revealed no trace of oil, blood, or pigment. Just heat distortion, faint signatures indicating that each piece had been thermally shocked and heated, cooled, and fixed, but never broken. The Istanbul Epigraphic Group, in 2014, offered a tentative framework. These were directionals, not symbols, but spatial cues, material equivalents of pauses, rests, silences, like the moment between two ritual actions where no word can be spoken. On the gem market, Chalcedony is sold cheaply, between $2 and $25 per carat, as beads, cameos, and slabs. But none of those resemble the Karasu tablets. No curvature, no polish, and indeed no inscription. These weren't made for worship, or remembrance, or display. They may not have been made for anyone at all, just placed and buried so the silence could stay where it belonged. The Chalcedony tablets marked nothing that could be read. No text, no image, only stress lines, set into stone. But not every ritual left marks on the hand or eye. Some left impressions in sound or its absence. Rank number 6, Celestite, the choir between worlds. In the subterranean necropolises beneath Byzantine Cappadocia, particularly near Derinkuyu and along the Pontic fringe, a pattern emerged so quiet, so specific it evaded interpretation for decades. Juvenile burials, no inscriptions, no Christian symbology, but always the same detail. Clusters of pale blue celestite crystals arranged in triangular formations near the base of the skull, just behind the ear canal. Not one adult tomb shared the feature, not one domestic site. Only children and only burials dated between 570 and 880 CE. Celestite, or strontium sulfate, is chemically stable but structurally fragile. Its Mohs hardness barely exceeds 3. It doesn't polish well, it dissolves in water, and it does not fluoresce. It also does not occur naturally in the volcanic tuff layers of Cappadocia. Every sample was traced back to the Black Sea coast, over 400 kilometers northeast, and transported deliberately, gently, and placed with unbroken consistency. Early archaeologists thought the placement was ornamental, but in 1991, a resonance study revealed something stranger. Untouched celestite absorbs low-frequency vibration between 20 and 50 hertz, the lower bounds of the human voice. Instead of echoing sound, it swallows it. This led researchers to propose a working hypothesis. The stones weren't there to transmit. They were there to mute, to seal off the auditory channel. Not in violence, but in stillness. Not a message, but a hush. None of the grave sets are displayed. The celestite degrades under light and moisture. Each cluster is suspended in argon, housed in EVA foam cradles, and observed only under microstructure analysis. In mineral trade, celestite sells as decorative clusters, $2 to $10 per gram, too soft for jewelry, too brittle for cutting. Yet collectors prize its spectral blue, often mistaking it for dyed quartz. But here, in the museum's sealed chamber, these stones are not collected, they are not sold, and no interpretation is printed on their case. Because across 47 juvenile graves in over a dozen necropolises, not one of the patterns ever changed. And if the stones carried a sound, it was one never meant to be heard again. The celestite crystals absorbed what was spoken and left behind no echo. But not all materials come with echoes. Some arrive without memory, without precedent, and without a place to return to. Rank number 5, Prehnite, the signal with no origin. In the museum's deepest archival tier, beyond language collections, beyond funerary grids, there's a drawer labeled non-repeatable context. Inside, 6 pieces of prehnite. No carvings, no polish, no marks of human use. Just smooth, translucent green clusters, botryoidal in form, and identical in one detail. All were embedded vertically in the ceilings, not floors, not walls, but in the vault seams of 3 sealed windowless chambers, in 3 deserts on 3 continents, with no cultural connection between them. Jordan, Uzbekistan, Sudan. The architecture had no ornament, no ritual toolkits, no access points. The chambers had no doors, only collapse allowed entry. And in each one, prehnite had been fitted into narrow chiseled voids above the headspace. Void size 2.1 centimeters across. Margin of placement error less than 0.4 millimeters. No evidence of glue, lime, or resin was found. The stones held without binding, as if fitted not into structure, but into function. A 2020 microabrasion study at the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle found friction wear on the contact ridges, consistent with vibrational contact. The crystals had moved, not by hand, by frequency. These were not decorations, not anchors, not offerings, and yet their placement repeated with such precision across thousands of kilometers that coincidence became unsustainable. Prehnite commercially has little value. $1 to $8 per carat in low-end spiritual markets cut into beads or cabochons. But no known tradition uses it architecturally. No scripture names it, no lore records it, and none of the chambers, none, were ever found intact. Only collapse revealed them. Only collapse allowed the stones to be seen. And still, to this day, no one knows what they were signaling or who was meant to receive it. What happens when placement has no origin and repetition no longer offers meaning? You stop trying to hear, you stop trying to decode, and instead, you look. But even that, in some places, was controlled, because not every message was carved. Some were projected, through stone. Rank number 5, prehnite, the signal with no origin. In the museum's deepest archival tier, beyond language collections, beyond funerary grids, there's a drawer labeled non-repeatable context. Inside, 6 pieces of prehnite, no carvings, no polish, no marks of human use, just smooth, translucent green clusters, botryoidal in form, and identical in one detail. All were embedded vertically in the ceilings, not floors, not walls, but in the vault seams of 3 sealed, windowless chambers, in 3 deserts, on 3 continents, with no cultural connection between them. Jordan, Uzbekistan, Sudan. The architecture had no ornament, no ritual toolkits, no access points. The chambers had no doors, only collapse allowed entry. And in each one, prehnite had been fitted into narrow chiseled voids above the headspace. Void size 2.1 centimeters across. Margin of placement error, less than 0.4 millimeters. No evidence of glue, lime, or resin was found. The stones held without binding, as if fitted not into structure, but into function. A 2020 microabrasion study at the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle found friction wear on the contact ridges, consistent with vibrational contact. The crystals had moved, not by hand, by frequency. These were not decorations, not anchors, not offerings, and yet their placement repeated with such precision across thousands of kilometers that coincidence became unsustainable. Prehnite commercially has little value. $1 to $8 per carat in low-end spiritual markets, cut into beads or cabochons. But no known tradition uses it architecturally. No scripture names it. No lore records it. And none of the chambers, none, were ever found intact. Only collapse revealed them. Only collapse allowed the stones to be seen. And still, to this day, no one knows what they were signaling, or who was meant to receive it. What happens when placement has no origin, and repetition no longer offers meaning? You stop trying to hear, you stop trying to decode, and instead, you look. But even that, in some places, was controlled, because not every message was carved. Some were projected through stone. Rank number 3, fluorite, the structure that wasn't static. At the Coast Interchange deposits in eastern Afghanistan, what began as a routine stratigraphic dig in 2002 turned anomalous by omission. No human remains, no pottery, no script, just a corridor. Interlocking limestone slabs laid in perfect compression, without mortar, and hidden deep between those joints. Cubic clusters of fluorite, invisible unless the structure was disassembled, inaccessible by design, and yet placed in patterns that tracked with engineered fault lines. Not for beauty, not for bearing load, but for behavior. Fluorite, calcium fluoride, is fragile. It cleaves easily. It dissolves in acid. It's unstable in moisture. But when exposed to thermal cycling, it does something unusual. It shifts color, and in rare conditions, it fractures in a symmetrical response to heat. When one coast fluorite fragment was subjected to gradual temperature change, it turned visibly from green to yellow, then cracked. Not randomly, but along axes that matched geometric striations carved nearby on adjacent limestone blocks. Those striations had been dismissed as tool marks. Now they mirrored fracture lines, a match of angles, spacing, recurrence. It was no longer a decorative mineral. It had become a responsive medium. In 2017, Zurich's epigraphic geometry group proposed that fluorite's lattice wasn't just symbolic. It was reactive code, a structure designed to break over time until information revealed itself through instability. On today's market, fluorite is common. It sells between $3 and $30 per carat, used for beads, spheres, mineral displays. But these clusters were never seen, never handled, and not meant to survive unchanged. They're housed now in low-vibration suspension, monitored under polarized microscopy because the fractures haven't stopped. Each one forms at a different vector. Each crack reveals a new angle, and none have repeated. The stone doesn't contain a message. It generates it, slowly, deliberately, in silence. Fluorite fractured into a message. Its meaning is revealed only by time, tension, and thermal decay. But not every material revealed itself. Some existed only to interrupt. Not to be seen, not to be heard, but to ensure that nothing else passed through. Rank number 2, Cassiterite, the shadow used to divide space. Recovered from beneath a collapsed monastic vault in eastern Anatolia, a series of uninscribed scrolls, ash-sealed codices, and scorched fibers were arranged in near-total silence. No language, no diagrams, no symbology, but laid between them, never touching, never broken, were narrow black bars. Each one is identical in size, 11.4 centimeters long, 0.8 wide, polished smooth. They weren't decorative. They weren't indexed. They were cassiterite, tin oxide, a mineral with no optical brilliance, no religious association, and no functional place in scribal tradition. At first, they were assumed to be spacers, relics of storage, but spectral analysis told a different story. These bars came from the Zagros foothills, nearly 800 kilometers east, and bore isotopic traces from smelting centers used exclusively for metal separation, not ornament. So why were they here? Neutron imaging answered it. Each cassiterite bar, when placed between organic scrolls, disrupted thermal transmission, not blocked it entirely, but severed it, creating dead zones of heat, scent, and potential decay. Invisible to the eye, but absolute in effect. This was not storage. This was containment. A working theory, published in the 2019 Review of Ritual Infrastructure, suggests these bars serve to divide conceptual domains, not between documents, but between kinds of information, what could be remembered and what could not be allowed to continue. Cassiterite is chemically stable, inert, unaffected by moisture, light, or time. Used today as the primary ore of tin, it holds no gemological value, less than $5 per kilogram on industrial markets. But in the vault beneath that Anatolian ruin, it was placed with surgical intent, not aligned to scripture, not arranged by author, but as a lattice of interruption, where presence meant partition. The museum stores 14 bars. No one has permission to rearrange them, not for exhibition, not for reproduction, because their meaning, if there is one, lies not in what they are, but in what they refuse to let pass through. Cassiterite did not transmit. It severed cleanly the space between things. But some stones predate space. Those were not placed to divide or protect or carry meaning. They were placed because someone recognized what they were, and what they were did not begin on Earth. Rank number 1. Zircon, the message that outlived its reader. It was found inside a clay vessel, unmarked, sealed, buried in the Darwar Craton of southern India, in a dry basin with no evidence of settlement, no grave, no tools, no ash. Inside, fine sand, nothing else. Except at the center, one raw zircon crystal, 2.1 millimeters in diameter, clouded, fractured, and older than every artifact ever curated. Zircon, zirconium silicate, forms deep in the Earth's crust. It accepts uranium, rejects lead, and holds its decay signatures longer than any other terrestrial material. This specimen, recovered, scanned, then tested under fission track microscopy, recorded a formation date of over 4.1 billion years ago, which means it formed when Earth's surface was still molten, before continents, before oceans, before biology. The vessel that held it? Neolithic, 10,000 years old. Human hands shaped the clay, sealed it, buried it, and left nothing else behind. No mark, no code, no lineage. But the zircon itself told a story no inscription could match. Its lattice was ruptured by age, damage at the atomic level from radioactive decay. But the fracture wasn't chaotic. It radiated outward in pentaradial symmetry, too regular to dismiss, too unlikely to ignore. And yet no known culture, ancient or modern, possessed tools to detect it. The halo patterns are invisible. The emission is silent. The information is internal, which leads to a single, unprovable inference. The person who buried it did not need to see its signal. They recognized its origin, and that was enough. In today's gem trade, zircon is faceted, treated, and colored, and sold between $50 and $400 per carat. But this piece has no market value. It is fractured, it emits low-level radiation, and it cannot be recut. The museum classifies it under non-linguistic long-duration signal carriers. It is stored in a Class 4 containment unit under leaded glass with no physical access. Not because it's dangerous, but since 2009, it has not given up anything else. It does not illuminate. It does not respond. It only continues to decay at a rate that defines time itself. There is no inscription, no myth, no title, only this. Someone placed it, knowing what it was. Before language could explain why, some stones resist meaning, some fracture into it, and a few, like zircon, outlast every attempt to understand them. But this is only one side of the story. If there are minerals that were used to silence, separate, or seal, then somewhere there must be others chosen for the opposite, to guide, to protect, maybe even to save. In our subsequent investigation, we turn toward a different question. What are the gemstones that humanity has turned to when there was nothing else left? From talismans in extinction rituals to minerals believed to reverse planetary collapse, the series continues with Top 10 Gemstones That Could Save the World. If this journey through lost messages, fractured signals, and buried silence meant something to you, supporting the channel helps us go deeper, travel further, and tell stories most platforms overlook. Subscribe, like, and share this with someone who sees more in a stone than sparkle. Because what's coming next might not stay buried.